Hello and welcome to another painting tutorial with Moog's Little Figures, where my bearded idiot does unspeakable things to innocent bits of plastic. Right, in this episode I will be showing you how to turn something like this into something a little bit more like this. You see, I had an occasion a few weeks ago to go and play my very first game of Age of Sigmar with a gentleman called SayHiPaul, who has his own YouTube channel. You may be aware of it. I'll stick a link to it in the video description. Now he spent, when I showed up there, his table was immaculate. When I showed up there, he took one look at my army and spent an almost embarrassing amount of time saying how good it looks, which personally I don't see it, because I know exactly how much effort went into this, and it's nowhere near as much as it first appears, and I will show you that in this video, because there really is nothing to it. If it wasn't actually in any way complicated, rest assured I couldn't do it. So first things first, what you do would start off with your dryad, and I've just given this a very basic once over with a matte black primer. Right. What I'm going to do next, this is kind of an important bit, is I'm going to sort out a zenithal, because I'm going to go in with some contrast paints in a minute. So I'm going to be using, it's my own concoction, but as near as it can be, to something called bleach bone, Citadel bleach bone paint. I'll just reach down and turn on my airbrush, because that's what I use, but you can do this just as easily with dry brush or a rattle can of your choosing. In fact, it's probably easier with a rattle can because there's less cleaning up afterwards. Right, so hopefully you can still hear me over the noise of the airbrush. Oh, just knocking everything over in my office. Oh, and everything's wrapped around everything else. Oh, it's a disaster. Right, there we go. Right, airbrush. Woo! Okay, paint. Paint goes in the airbrush. Just a little bit of that, because you don't need much. So you see that's pretty much bleach bone. You can't see with this camera. This is hopefully the last video I'm going to be taking with this camera before getting a brand spanking new one. Let's move my other guy out of the way just in case there's overspray. And what you want to do is you just want to light cover all over with the grey, or the bleach bone, or wraith bone, there's one. Bleach bone. Now there's a blast from the past. Light covering all over, just to pick out a little bit of the detail. And then you want to pick a light source. I usually go up sort of 45 degrees up from up to the left of the miniature, and just go a bit heavier on that. So you're just picking out light values. So anything that you want to really pop gets a hit of the airbrush. Go. There we go, and instantly you've got light and shadow values there, which is really important with the contrast paints, because they're translucent. So if you go in with a zenithal prime like this, and you pick out the light values as carefully as you can, sketch them out, then most of your work's already done with the highlighting and shading, even before you've applied any colour. Now you can be as careful as you want with this, but this is a rank and file miniature, so we don't really care too much. Just clean my airbrush. Well, that's empty. Haha! Preparation, ladies and gents. So the name of the game but not my game. Let's give that a quick clear. If you do end up getting an airbrush, these are really cool. Sort of, I think they're for tattoo ink and such like that. There's a squeezy bottle with a nozzle on it. And as usual, paint has gone everywhere. Thankfully off camera, so I don't look a complete fool. Right, here we go. So that's that cleaned out, and this should be, hopefully, dry by now, so we can go in with, now this is roughly 50-50, I think it's Basilicanum grey and Wildwood, basically a grey and a brown contrast paint. You don't have to use contrast paints if you've got something like Monument Hobbies Pro Acryl transparent paints, you can use them. That's what they look like. So they're from Monument Hobbies. I have no affiliation with them, but they do make good paints. So, like I say, 50-50 Wildwood and Basilicanum grey. Now the great thing about contrast paints for an airbrush is that the longer you leave it over, the darker paint actually gets. So you see, with a very light coat, you're sort of a grey brown, but not too dark. And from there, a few more coats over, and you can start to see it getting a bit darker. There we go. It's not a particularly even colour, but then it's a natural sort of gradation you'd see in tree bark, and that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to create something that looks natural. Okay, I'm just going to clean my airbrush out again, because I think we're more or less done with that until a bit closer to the end. And you can see, I mean, this is taking me, what, a couple of minutes. If you get a unit of 10 or even 20 of these, you can just go bang, 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 bang along the line, and it doesn't take any time at all to get to this sort of stage. There we go. Away you go, airbrush. Your job here is done. Okay, now I'll demonstrate what we can do with a dry brush. Now, I don't have many traditional Citadel paints. I have an awful lot of Army Painter and Green Stuff World and Vallejo and other paints, but I don't actually have that. The bulk of my Citadel paints tend to be the contrast ones. Until this lot bring out their speed paint range, I'm really looking forward to that. So we'll see if they're any good. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go over this with dry brushing, just to pick out all the details on the raised areas, which is all I've done here. Again, this is really quick and easy. So this is Army Painter Darkstone, which is a sort of a dark grey brown, and we're going to mix that with a bit of, see how this comes out. I think I shook this before. Yeah, we're going to mix that with a bit of, what's this, leather brown. I'm not entirely sure what the equivalent Citadel paints is, but there are loads of conversion charts out there. I'll see if I can dig one out and stick a link to it in the description for the video. So if we mix these together, we end up with a darkish brown like so. Now, dry brushing is a bit of a misnomer. I'll stick a bit of lighter notes in there actually, so we can do this in one hit. Dry brushing is a bit of a misnomer because you don't actually want your brush to be dry. You want it sort of moist. Otherwise, if you go in with a completely dry brush with just paint pigment on there, essentially you end up with a kind of a powdery finish, and it's not always what you want. Sometimes it is, and then you use a cloth or something like that to suck all the moisture out of your brush. This is dead cheap. This is you get these off Amazon for less than £5 for a pack of God knows how many. Just makeup brushes. You can get them in a variety of stiffness. From this, which is a really reasonably bouncy bristle, down to something that's super soft. God only knows what they're really used for. I think this is for blusher, something or other, maybe powders, some powder of some sort, applying powder. I'm sure somebody will tell me in the comments. So you see, what I'm doing is I'm just going over the raised areas very lightly, and what that's doing is it's just picking out the raised areas. Well, this camera's dreadful, isn't it? I do apologise. Like I say, hopefully the last one I'm using last time I'm using it for a painting tutorial, and I may end up even redoing this one, we'll see. I've been keyed into the Logitech C920, I think it is, which is apparently the sort of thing you want for doing things like this. The videoing, not the painting. Don't try and paint with a webcam, it won't come out well. You see, I'm mixing in a little bit more of the cream to take the light values up a bit more. It's not quite the same tone as the other one, but this is going to be a separate unit, and it's good to have a bit of variation in there anyway, because trees do not all look identical. And we're already looking good, I think. Certainly getting that. And you don't even need to take this much time over the miniature at all if you're doing a rank and file. See, there's no autofocus on this camera. That's dreadful. I'll get some proper pictures of it later. Right. From there, we just want to go into the deepest recesses with an ink of some flavour. Now, what shall I use? I think I will go... do you know what? Old Faithful. It's been a while since I've used this, he says, having just called it Old Faithful. Because I've been doing a lot of my painting lately using streak and grind from AK, which you can absolutely do, and that will actually work. In fact, I might tag that onto the end of this one, show you how that's done, but for now we're going to use a bit of Agrax. And you know what you're doing here, if you're at all familiar with painting. You're just going into the deeper recesses and just giving some shade to where the deepest shadow would be. Now, a lot of people would be slathering this on at this point, and you can do that, you absolutely can. But if you're going to do that, it's probably best to do it before you dry brush, I find anyway. you take a slightly more careful approach, you can be a bit more surgical about where your shadow is. Whoop! Nearly knocked over the ink. Right, so deep into the recesses, right up in there. Take a look at it from the angle where the light would come from, and where the light would not come from, and this is where you want it. The name of the game is tricking the eye into thinking the light is coming from where the light is not coming. Yeah, that made more sense in my head. Hopefully you get the gist. Creating an artificial light source on the miniature. You don't have to do this, you can rely on natural light, but I find because of the scale of the miniature it's generally a good idea to get a little bit of contrast in there for things you're going to be holding at tabletop. Having on the tabletop a bit further away, where more contrast is better. You'll notice I don't paint to a Golden Demon standard at all. I paint to get things on the table at a reasonable standard. And people seem to think the standard I paint to is fairly decent. Me being my own worst critic, I don't tend to agree. But sometimes you don't want to take painting tips from a Golden Demon winner. Sometimes you want to take painting tips from someone who's a little closer to your level. And that is certainly where I am. I've been painting for a little over a year now, after a long hiatus from the hobby, and I think I'm just about getting my eye in to the point where I can offer some useful tips, hopefully. Right, so there we go. And that, if I were to go over that with a dry brush again, to really make it pop, would be about all you need to do. And then you're onto things like eyes. In fact, I'll do that. I'll just give it another once over with some of the light grey. Just to really pick out the very highest details, areas closest to the light, highest points, and you're just building up contrast. Which is what you want. There we go. Right, eyes and nose and mouth and such. Again, dead easy. Do not be frightened of eyes and noses and mouths. Let me just get where's my white? Well, that doesn't sound happy. Let me just turn that off. There we go, be at peace. Where's my white? Oh, that'll do. I do have some nice whites somewhere. This is not it. Is that it? No, that's not it. But this will do. That's Game Air from Vallejo, dead white. Let's spot that. There is a wet palette under this, which I don't tend to use it a lot these days, unless I'm actually glazing and blending and all that, doing all that nonsense. And it's a real help. I don't tend to do that very often though, because I can get away without it. I can do it. I can do the glazing game. I have done my time doing that. I don't feel the need to these days. If I want to spend a week on a miniature and getting it really, really spot on, I know I can. Very rare that I want to do that. Right, you're not too worried about... God, that's absolutely dreadful, isn't it? Oh, trust me, that's in there. I may end up redoing this video. You're not caring too much about getting it precisely in the eye socket, because what goes around the eye socket is going to turn into a bit of glow. In fact, you almost want to dry brush a little bit around the edge to really pick out the around the face. I wish I could focus that a little bit better. No, that's just going to look dreadful. No. Nope. I'll do this video again with a proper camera when I get it. But this will do for the time being, I think. Just to get something up. Right, from there, we use another contrast, thematic blue. A little spot of that. Onto your palette. A little squidge of water, because you want it almost like a glaze, just to get some colour in there. Just to get some colour around the outside. That's a little bit too much water. So you're just demonstrating that I'm not a golden demon level painter at all. I only barely know what I'm doing. And a lot of what I do is make mistakes, like I've just done there. And get into there with a little bit more colour. So all I've done there is I've given the areas around the mouth and the eyes a little bit of a bluish tint over the white, which creates a glowing like effect. And I've gone in with slightly more thematic blue. This camera doesn't really show because it's quite subtle, to pick out the recesses. Yeah. So she's got kind of a blue face now with that glowy white around the eyes. Now, for a moment, I'm going to let that dry. And I will have to find my proper white paint. Or will I? It's always the way, always the way. You pick these things out and then you put them down again, and oh, there we are, there we are. Lovely. Right, found it. Right. Right. Okay, this is, no, I'm not going to tip that towards the camera, that's dumb because the lid's not on properly. Yanden Yellow, another contrast paint. And this is just to give a little bit of colour, a little bit of autumn theme to the loinclothy type skirty things that this dryad is wearing, because that's the theme of my army. Autumnal theme. And time's getting on here, so what I'll probably do is I'll do the basing tutorial in another video, just to keep this as brief as I can. This is, I mean, you can probably guess the rest from here, but I'll persevere. So it just gets a little bit of autumnal colour in there. low saturation because it looks natural. And that was just straight over the brown and the highlighting. So look at the eyes, they look more or less done. Yeah. And again, if you've got a unit of these, you've got 10 of them in a row, you can sort of go through, and by the time you get to the end of your line of 10, the eyes on your first one are dry, and then you can go through them again and do the next bit. Right. This is a reasonably fine brush, a 0 brush. I tend to use anything from a 0 up to about 4 for normal everyday painting. 0 is perfectly fine for this though, as long as it comes to a reasonable point, which this one does. The point's the important bit. I mean, I could do this with a 4. Should I do that with a 4? No, that'll be showing off. Let's just do it with a 0. This is where a steady hand comes in, so brace against your desk. And all you're doing now is, we're not going to put pupils or anything like that in, because nothing crazy like that, is we're just going to get a bit of white in the middle of the eyes. Which the contrast paint has nicely highlighted for us. And that little bit of a white just elevates the light in the area to make it look like it's glowing. Pick out the quote-unquote teeth. Not because Dryad teeth are white particularly, but again, we're trying to create the source of that glow. And there we go. I'll take a still shot of this at the end of and tack it onto the end of this, because the camera really is not wanting to focus at all, is it? But from there, I mean, that's pretty much all you want to do. From there you can paint all the little leaves and what have you in autumnal colours, and then the rest is just the base. I'll do that in another video. Okay, I hope you found this useful despite the appalling camera. I shall see you in the next one.